My name's Lorraine Holt. In my single days I was Lorraine Morris, and I lived in Violet Street, Frankston, which is way up Cars Street. Earliest thing I can remember is the first day of going to primary school, which was Davy Street, the only primary school apart from the Catholic school across the road. And then Frankston High School was down where Chisholm is now. Couldn't wait to get to school, and we had to walk all the way from Violet Street down Cars Street, through Beauty Park at the back of Davy Street Primary School. And Beauty Park in those days had a lot of aviaries, and there also was a natural lake in the middle. It had an island in the middle with more aviaries, and we used to walk through that every day to go to school. And we didn't even know it was a long way because everybody had to walk to school. Because everyone did it, you didn't think anything of it, you just walked.
Not the cars like there are today.
No, but on a fair walk, especially for a little 5-year-old, everybody did it, so it didn't matter. And in those days we didn't have a library, but Waterland's newsagents down in Frankston, which was quite close to the corner of Plain Street and Nepean Highway, which in those days was called Bay Street, Frankston. But he used to have a lending library, a penny lending library. So you could borrow library books from him at a penny. And he had quite a good range of books. My aunt used to get a stack of books every week. So that was good. And then eventually they started a junior library over at Samuel Sherlock Reserve. You know that
Yes.
blackish wooden building at the front?
Yes.
That was the junior library. And so that was handy when that eventually started. So I just went to Davy Street Primary School for preps, which in those days was called the Bubs. So from the Bubs grade at 5 through to the end of grade 6, and then you automatically would go to Frankston High School if you were staying on at school, which in those days you had to 14 anyway. We didn't go up to grade 7 or 8 at the Davy Street. So off we went to high school, and Quality Street was the street in front of the high school. And there was a tuck shop there, Mrs. Aldridge's tuck, and she used to make these, what you now would call party pies, but she used to make these small pies like that for morning play. We'd go out of school at morning play and thought we were eating a bit because we were allowed to leave the school grounds, and go across and buy these threepenny pies, which was a great morning tea. You know, that was terrific. And it was so grown up to be in a high school where instead of being in one classroom all day with one teacher, you moved from classroom to classroom and had different teachers. We used the guide hall next door for assemblies. And it was so grown up to be in a high school where instead of being in one classroom all day with one teacher, you moved from classroom to classroom and had different teachers. When someone I'm not looking at came to Frankston age 14, it was too shy to go and start school with all these strangers. So you wouldn't go to school, would you?
No.
No.
No. I went straight to work.
And he ended up living around the corner from Billy Underwood, which is how you came to know him, wasn't it?
Right over the back fence.
Do you know, because in those days, the parents were in charge at home, the teachers were in charge at school, and the police were in charge in the street, and they knew everybody. Yeah. And you did anything wrong, they'd tell on you, or you get a kick in the bum from the policeman and told I'll be talking to your father. So nobody did really ratty things. And of course the pubs were all closed at 6 o'clock. So when we were old enough to start going to the dance on a Saturday night would start at 8 and finish at midnight. And it was safe, and you could walk home from the dance, and I could be home at 10 past because I didn't live far away from the dance hall. At interval at the dance that you could buy soft drink. Well, I hated soft drink, so I never bothered. I think it was cordial anyway, but I didn't have that. But there was no alcohol there and there were no drugs. And everybody danced with everybody. It was great fun. It was really, really good. And when rock and roll came in, at this dance, the first dance after interval, they'd let you go for rock and roll. It was the only time that they'd do it. The rest was set dances, all the different ballroom dances that we knew. The circus would come to town in the summer, and they would set up their big tent in Laurie's paddock, which is the corner of Thompson Street and Wells Street. And it was a big vacant block at the time, and it eventually had a kindergarten built on the Thompson Street frontage. But I can remember when we still, on the Thompson Street frontage, had the blacksmith. Do you remember the Black
Yes,
Street?
yes, we did.
Yeah.
Yes. And also the library was in there as well.
Eventually, after Moore's store.
It's now
and
the
Hoyt
Hoyt Cinema Complex now. Yeah.
All that area was Laurie's paddock. And there were still houses in Wells Street, private houses. Mrs. Dyer used to live in one of the houses in Wells Street, and she would have a stall on her front porch every Friday to raise money for one of the Melbourne hospitals. And you could buy penny toffees. She used to make toffee and put it in paper cups that you use for patty pans. You'd buy penny toffees, but she used to make preserves, or there was stuff from her garden, and something she'd knitted, but she ran a stall every Friday. And I remember when people had their hair permed, it was what they called an electric perm. They had a big thing with, they used to do whatever they did with the curlers and then plug them in, and it was electric. Can you imagine having an electric perm? When I was 9 years old, I was flower girl at my aunt's wedding. My father's sister got married, and I was a flower girl. And I went and had my hair set at Miss Gallus's hairdressing salon, which was in Plain Street near the Picture Theatre. And I felt so grown up to be getting my hair done at 9. And when I walked in, I said to the lady at the desk, I have an appointment at 9:30 to have my hair set. My name is Miss Morris. And everybody in the salon roared laughing because I said Miss Morris. But I thought that's what you were supposed to do. I didn't know that you'd just say, my name's Lorraine Morris and I've got an appointment. So I was very formal about it. You know, in those days when people went shopping, they wore a hat and gloves
They
to
did
do the
too.
shopping.
Yeah.
And if you went to Melbourne, you wore a hat and gloves, definitely, and always stockings. And the mothers, of course, didn't have washing machines, but outside, either in a laundry or a lean-to or out in the open, there would be a copper. And you'd have to light a fire under the copper to boil the water up, which you'd have to bucket in. And when it was boiling, you'd put in your velvet soap, make some suds, and put in your whatever it was you were washing, your whites first, poke it down with a poker, a wooden poker, and eventually you would have to lever these heavy wet sheets out into whatever you were going to rinse them in, and put them through a mangle if you were lucky enough to have a mangle, or else squeeze out and hang on the clothesline. I know one time I thought it would be very clever to hang on to the back of the ice truck as he drove off, and it worked well till we got into Liddesdale Avenue, because he was pulling me along. It was lovely. But there's a big steep hill in Liddesdale Avenue taking you down to the bottom of Oliver's Hill, and my legs couldn't keep up, and over I went, and I came back covered in blood and went home. My mum thought someone had tipped tomato sauce all over me. And I got into such trouble for that. And another thing I got into trouble for is after we shifted from Violet Street, we moved up to the top of Ewell Street where, well, it's not really the top, but it seemed like it to me. Between William Street and opposite Denby Street, they had built what we call commission houses, which is Ministry of Housing stuff. The first commission houses in Frankston, and we got one of them. So we moved in, and then I used to, going to Davis Street Primary School, ride my bike down Mule Street and down the hill and through the golf course as it was then, and over to the primary school. And this day I was riding round and round in circles talking to someone else who was walking along, and the greenkeeper from the golf club ticked me off and told me to get off that bike and never ride it there again. And I couldn't understand why, and I'll be telling your father. And I thought, everybody rides their bike through the golf course, what's wrong with this? But I was really in trouble. And when my father got home that night, I didn't just get ticked off, I got a belting for it. And I still couldn't understand what I did wrong. So from then on, I rode the bike all the way down Mule Street and down onto Hastings Road and took the front way. I never went through the golf course again. And it was years before I worked out that what I got into trouble for was riding my bike round and round on the putting green. It was the putting green. Oh, the worst thing you could do. But to me, it was just grass. You know, everybody rode their bike along through the grass. But there you go. So sometimes people don't explain things properly. If they only said you don't ever go on the putting green, it wouldn't have happened. And in those days, on that section of the golf course where they had the rough and the trees at the side, there used to be all these lovely orchids, wild orchids, green hoods and spider orchids grew there. And of course that led through onto Beauty Park, which had all these aviaries and bushes and things. And that led through to Frankston Football Ground, which had these big, massive memorial gates. And on the right was a gully inside the grounds, but there was a gully, nothing to do with the actual football oval. But of course all that's been drained now and filled in. But Frankston's full of all these native springs, you know.
Geez.
Yeah, it's
Still
everywhere.
got Sweetwater Creek too.
Yeah, and there's springs everywhere. But of course everything's in drains now, so you don't know about it. And I remember when St Paul's Church of England, the original church, got burnt down, which must have been the early 50s, because I used to go to Sunday school there at church, always. And then they, at the time, Father Keeley from the Catholic Church, when the Church of England burnt down, he said, well look, I can't give money to help with rebuilding, but I can give you money to help pull down the wreckage, which was a very nice way of going about it. And so they built the new St Paul's, and I think it was already 5 or 6 years old, or even more, when we got married in 1960, wasn't it? Yeah. So, and I was always in the choir there at St Paul's, and many people came and went when I was still there.
What did you get up to as a kid?
So we used to play in the street, and we'd play cowboys and Indians, and climb trees, build huts, take 3 days to build a hut and another day to pull it down. It was just good fun. We would play skippy with ropes, marbles. Most of us didn't have many toys, so you wouldn't be taking them outside. You know, if you had a doll, it stayed inside where it was safe. But I had a doll's pram, and it was a grey wooden pram. I don't know what the material was, but it wouldn't have been much thicker than balsa wood. It was very thin stuff, and then it had a stiff hood. It wasn't a hood I could put down, I had to leave it up, it was stiff. And when my sister was a baby, because she's 8 years younger than me, I used to push her around in my doll's pram. So then that was pretty good while she was little, and it was good for my mum that I was able to whiz her around and get her out of the way. Because I grew up in Frankston, and I found that if I happened to go to Melbourne by train, I always got train sick, always. So I decided that I wouldn't go and get a job in the city, like a lot of people did. I thought, oh, I'll just have to work in Frankston. No way could I get the train every day. And the best job I had was, I spent 5 years working as a receptionist at Mr Spicer's, the optometrist. He was also on Bay Street. I was still with him after we got married, wasn't I, for first year?
Yes, that's right.
Which was lovely. Of course, we built our house in Beaconsfield Avenue behind Monash Uni, and we were there for 48 years. And in that time, the roads got made, the sewage went through, everybody had cars. It all just changed so much. But even when our 4 children were young, which is, they were born in 61, 63, 65 and 67, so during the 70s they could play in the street too. That was pretty safe. And lots of people in our street had 2, 3, 4 children. So there was plenty of kids to play with. There were such lovely, innocent days. It was terrific. You know, I would rather have been a child then than I would now. I mean, most people didn't have a telephone, but maybe one person in the street might have. Your mail was delivered twice a day by the postman, and everybody got letters because you didn't have email. and because not everyone had phones, people would have to write to you. So it was good.
What was it like raising a family in Frankston?
Oh, well, it was pretty good because there were things like when you went to hospital and had a baby, you were in hospital for a week. You stayed in hospital for a week. That was the norm. And then after a week, you would go home and you would go take your baby to the health centre, which at the time was in the area where the civic centre is now. There was a fire station there, and behind that was this health centre. And the nurse at the health centre, she was a nurse there when I was a baby, and she was still there when I was having mine. But you could go whenever you liked. There was none of this, you had an appointment and could only go so many times. Anybody could go and see the health centre nurse any day, as often as they needed. We worked to raise funds to build a preschool at Bruce Park, and I was working for it when our eldest boy Stephen was ready to go to preschool, but of course we hadn't built that one, so he went to Joy Street off Cranbourne Road. He went there, and then the next year we were building the preschool, and our second son Brian went to Joy Street for one term and then was able to go up to Bruce Park, and then our other two children went there. And in the meantime, Frankston Heights Primary School had been built at the top of Heather Hill Road, so our children all went there. So it was all local and easy. At the beginning, in Heather Hill Road, we only had one shop, a little general store. And then slowly we got more, and one did post office duties as well, and now it's okay, there's enough shops. On a Friday I used to go shopping. This is from our house in Beaconsfield, and of course I had a pram. I had one of those big English prams and a pram seat on the front, and I would push the pram down our dirt roads to Leawarra railway station behind Monash Uni, and get the train down to Frankston on a Friday and do my shopping, and then I'd push my pram up Beach Street, up past McAllister Street to where Ken's parents lived, and have lunch with them before I then would walk home, which meant going up through Dean Street, across the railway line and dragging this pram up this dirt road, up this hill, and I'd get home exhausted, absolutely exhausted. I never did anything else on a Friday. I'd get home, put the shopping away, and that'd be it, collapse. I was quite happy bringing up children then, and we ended up belonging to St Luke's Church of England in McMahon's Road, because that had been built, and they said, oh, well, where you live, behind Monash University, you now belong to St Luke's, you don't belong to St Paul's. So we used to go there, and they hadn't built the church, they just had the hall. So we'd go there, and the kids went to Sunday school there, and the boys were in SEBS, Church of England Boys Society, which I think it was Thursday nights, so I used to go to that. And I have to say, none of them go anywhere near any churches now. Now they're all grown up and say, no, not interested. So, but because everybody knew everybody, you really had to behave. Even the grown-ups had to behave.
Parents back then knew each other by Mr. and Mrs.
Oh, they were more
instead
formal.
of first names, didn't they?
More formal.
Oh yes.
Well, what
That
did you
was incredible.
what did you think when you arrived in Frankston?
Oh look, I was too young to think anything really.
Well, were you thinking to yourself, England's better, or
No,
no?
no, not at all. Actually, that's a hard act for me to follow. I can't go into anything like that sort of detail that you've just gone into.
Do you remember?
By the way, I'm Ken Holt, in case you didn't know. And I came here in 1950 with Mum and Dad. I had two brothers here 2 years previous to that. They're still here, still alive, doing well.
They're 90 and 88.
See them quite frequently. Oh no, I've never ever looked back because I didn't have anything to look back to. But as I got older, I realised my home town that I came from was absolutely wonderful to me. But having visited it since, 50 years later, oh no, no way. But however, I've had a marvellous lifetime. 52 years married yesterday.
And
Was
we
it
both
love it?
forgot. We both forgot about it.
Oh, Was it,
It was Monday.
Monday,
And we
sorry.
both forgot. I think that's hilarious.
was it love at first sight when you first met?
No.
Well, we were in the band, and I think you'd been in the band a few months. I'd been in it since I was 14, and we used to have practice on a Monday night and a Friday. Learners was Monday night. Friday night was real practice, and then we'd have what they call play-outs at the weekends. You know, not every weekend, but sometimes we'd be in parades, and sometimes we'd be playing at some sort of function, maybe at the hospital fete or something like that. And this particular time, I knew Ken, but we weren't interested in each other. But anyway, Lloyd Warland,
Yes.
who was the manager of the Frankston Drive-In Theatre, approached our bandmaster and said, "We've got a film coming on called John Philip Sousa." It was a John Philip Sousa story. And Sousa was this famous American bandsman who wrote all these great stirring marches, etc., etc. I'd like the band to come and play at the drive-in before the film. So that was a play-out we agreed to do. And of course, in those days I didn't drive and didn't have a car. And I got dropped off by the family and was planning to go off to something else afterwards. But then, after we'd played before the start of the film, Lloyd Warland came and said, "Look, I'd like you to play at interval as well." And what was I going to do? I didn't have a car or anything. So Ken said, "Well, you can come and sit in my car if you like, that'll be all right, and I'll drop you off home after." So that was fine, because he was a nice boy, so that was all right. And anyway, we got talking as you do, and then he invited me out the next week to go to the dance at Dandenong, didn't you? The Dandenong dance. And I think, yeah, that'd be fine, and we went, and we had a great time, and 6 weeks later we were engaged. So that was fast, but I mean, once if you're ready and it's right, it was fine. And then we got married 13 months later, and now 52 years later I'm still thinking, was it a good idea? But it was funny, because when we were getting married, my aunt that I lived with didn't want us to get married at all. She didn't like him because he was a pom. So once we were married, if I was not happy with Ken, I would say, "You're just lucky Auntie Grace is still around, because I'm never going to let her say I told you so." And then when she finally died, about 13 years later, he said, "Can I go now?" But it was too late. It was too late. You know, you made your bed, you lied it. Now, you see, we get on really well, because I let him do whatever he likes until I think, no, that's it. And when I say no, he knows I really, really, really mean it, and that's good, isn't it? Then you're good, aren't you? You know, I was thinking about the doctors that we had, the different doctors. There was Dr. Aykroyd,
Oh,
and
goodness.
Dr. Maroney,
Bull.
Dr. Vincent. And Dr. Vincent, his house was Strawn, that brick place at the front of Frankston University on Montmartre Road. And then behind him was the chook farm, this big chook farm. And of course we went to live in Beaconsfield Avenue behind that. And then the Mr. and Mrs. Higgs, who owned the chook farm, sold it, and they built Frankston Teachers College. And then the Teachers College became Chisholm, and then it became Monash
University.
So we've seen it in all its glory from the beginning to the end. But so that was where Dr. Vincent lived, and it seemed so far out of town. And even when we bought our block of land in Beaconsfield Avenue off Lardner Road, oh gee, it's so far out. And now look at it, it's not. It's not so far out at all. It's all gone.
So changed.
Yeah.
So changed.
Yeah. And the Mile Bridge really was a mile from the post office. We used to go to the beach on our own. We were allowed to go to the beach, and I know my mum used to say, "It's quite all right to go to the beach on your own and go in swimming. You must not go in deeper than your waist," because none of us could really swim. "Do not go past your waist," and so we didn't. But there was no sunscreen.
You jump off the end of the pier?
Yeah, I used to go. Well, that's after I was, when Mum used to let us go on our own, we were about 8, 9. As teenagers, we used to all just go swimming off the end of the pier. Just jump in off the end. We didn't have all these shampoos and conditioners. You washed your hair every Saturday in velvet soap, which was fine because soft soap. And it'd take all afternoon for it to dry. You'd have to set it so you look beautiful for Saturday night for the dance. And do you know, this is true, and it took me a long time to work out what it was. Every Sunday morning I woke up with what I now would call a hangover, which was nothing to do with drinking, but everybody smoked, not me. So you'd walk into a dance hall and there'd be a haze of smoke over the top of all the dancers. And of course I'd be breathing that in. And I'd be very seedy on a Sunday, really seedy.
Into your clothing.
Oh yes, I used to. And I remember one time Ken and I went to a ball, and I'd had my hair set that day. You know, it was a big deal. You know, I knew I looked lovely. Off I went to the ball. It was a lovely time. We got home, and I got undressed and into my night clothes, and I hung my dress out on the clothesline to try and air the smoke out of it. And I got into bed, and I said again, I can't stand it. The smell was in my head. It killed me to have to wash it out. But everybody smoked. And they were not aware of the danger. It used to take all day Saturday to get ready for the dance, Saturday night.
Where did you attend the dances?
The Masonic Hall, which is right next to Medical One, opposite Davis Street. For that, I used to go to what they called the Polaco dance, which was in, I think it must have been their canteen. Do you think it was their canteen?
I think it must have been. Yeah.
Because it had wooden floors and all that.
Down
but it was at the Polaco
bottom
factory.
end of Wells Street.
Next to the creek.
Beach end of Wells Street.
But I wasn't allowed to go to the RSL dance because that was, the older boys used to go there, and my aunt wouldn't let me go to that. She said it was considered too grown up for me. I was 21 the day we got engaged and got married at 22. It was pretty normal for girls to be getting married around 19, 20, 21, 20. I remember one single girl who finally got married at 28, and we all thought she really was over the hill.